First, the Supreme Court races. This is actually the only opportunity where those of us here in this room may be surprised. And the surprise, even though it's remote, could occur in the Central Supreme Court District. 4 years ago, in the Southern Supreme Court District, Oliver Diaz and Bubba Pierce faced off with each other. The U.S. Chamber dumped a bunch of money into the race on behalf of Bubba Pierce, and he won that race, defeated the incumbent Oliver Diaz. 4 years later, in the Northern Supreme Court District, you've got two candidates relatively unknown. The Chamber of Commerce has dumped a bunch of money into the race on behalf of Josiah Coleman, and the odds are is that that's going to help him win that race. 4 years ago, in the Central Supreme Court District, you had Jim Kitchens run against the incumbent Jim Smith, and for whatever reason, the same circumstances that applied in the Southern District, the U.S. Chamber stayed out of that race, and Jim Kitchens won that race. 4 years later, this year, in the Central Supreme Court race, in a district that Obama won 4 years ago by 23,000 votes, you have a candidate choosing to oppose Bill Waller, and the Chamber, for whatever reason, is once again staying out of that race, at least on television. They spent a modest amount of money on radio bashing Earle Banks, but for whatever reason, they have decided not to come after Earle Banks on television in the same way that 4 years ago they decided not to come after Jim Kitchens on television. Now, I have no reason to know why they're doing that. I can't explain why in the South 4 years ago they did one thing, 4 years later in the North they're doing the same thing, but in the Central District they're not doing it. And in a district that 4 years ago Barack Obama carried by 23,000 votes. You would think that if both Flip Phillips and Earle Banks wins their respective races, that it would give the proverbial trial lawyer versus business split on the court a 5-4 majority in favor of the trial lawyers. You would think with it that much at stake, there would be a lot more going on in the Supreme Court races. And Andy and I have talked about this, and neither one of us understand why it's evolving like it is. But if there's going to be a surprise in Mississippi, it will be in the Central Supreme Court race if Earle Banks is able to ride on the coattails of Barack Obama and actually win that race.
In the Central District, Jere is right, and Commissioner Hall knows it's a tough district for conservatives/Republicans, granted that Chief Justice Waller is running in a nonpartisan race, but he's certainly going to be cast as the conservative candidate, and the Republican Party has endorsed him. But Chief Justice Waller cuts across more political lines in our state than almost any other political figure I can think of. He cuts across racial lines, he cuts across demographic lines, he cuts across partisan lines for a whole variety of different reasons. For one thing, it's just his personal aura. He's just a really hard-working, likable guy and an excellent retail campaigner. Part of it's his family history. Part of it's his history in the National Guard. The part of it is politically they started out, the Wallers all started out as Democrats, and granted, again, it's a nonpartisan race, but I think that notwithstanding a tough district and Barack Obama on the ticket on tomorrow, that Chief Justice Waller will win, and win by a comfortable enough margin that we won't be up too late watching the results on that one.